Hi everyone. My name is Jonne Heikkinen. I'm working as a data science manager in Solita. And firstly, I'd like to talk a bit about who we are, what we do. Well, we are the fastest growing creative tech company in the Nordics. And the fastest growing area in our company is the data science. So out of those 500 professionals, the analytics is the bread and butter for 150 professionals. We have a solid foundation in information management. We started off 20 years ago as a contractor for Nokia, and since then we've been working on with information management and lately for the last few years with data science. We have done quite a lot of different projects in different domains. We work with our customers in retail, we work in media, we work in banking, we work in heavy industry, we work in aviation, we work with some of the well-respected sport brands, and we're fortunate enough to work with some of the Fortune 50 companies as well. So a bit about myself. I'm a data science manager, and I lead a team of data warehousing experts, data architects, data engineers, and data scientists. And what we do in our daily life is that we help our customers to build the data strategy, build the infrastructure, formulate those business problems to hypotheses that can be solved with analytics. And we eventually help them to promote the action. As I've been working with different data science teams, I've been fortunate to see what functions and what works well and what doesn't. And what I see quite often is that quite a lot of the companies are not still yet capturing the full value of data science. Well, if we first think about what data science is, it's not a waterfall model, it's an iterative process, but these are the steps on a very high level. So it's about acquiring data, it's about processing data, and it's about transforming the data to actionable insights, and it's about acting. Quite many companies excel in the first three phases, but they fall short when it comes to acting. Either the data science doesn't really drive action, or it's taking ages. And it should be about so that this funnel, the throughput time of this funnel, is as short in time as possible. Why? Because it's about getting shit done. It's about finishing things. The value realizes only when the first three parts, or actually the value realizes only when the act happens. Even though you have the most brilliant analysis and the most brilliant information management system. But if nothing happens on behalf of the data or the analysis, then there's zero value, 0 points for the analysts. I want to share you some concrete examples of those data science teams who manage to minimize the throughput time and who promote action in their daily lives. So firstly, those data science teams and organizations who promote action and capitalize the full value of data science, they recognize who's the decision maker. So every single analysis have to have a plan, meaning that you have to recognize who's the decision maker, because solving a business problem doesn't really promote act, but helping the decision maker to actually do something with the data, that leads to value. So on the very most top level, you have human and you have a machine. So is it about making an analysis for the support of product manager, when to launch a product, time, channels, who are the early adopters, and which location? Or is it about machine where a series of small decisions are made in a short period of time? For example, like the LinkedIn's people you might know. So once you know who's the decision maker, you can actually start digging down to the actual problem. The basic needs, the expectations, how the business benefits from this approach. Okay, once you have that set up, you need to have a reference point. What is the current state? Because if you want to improve something, you need to have something that you have as a reference. You reflect against. And from those, and from that current state analysis, you actually realize more about what needs to be learned. And finally, you need to know what's the deliverable. Is it an email, Excel sheet, dashboard, a REST API that serves the mobile application, for example? Let's dig a bit deeper. So the case human. For example, the data collection here can be quite expensive, because if you think about it, the human decision making can be actually quite complex. You might to have take account in the different data sources, and that can be actually time consuming, and the data sources might not be available, so you have to buy them. And if you think about testing, you can't really launch products more than once. You can launch it just once, so it has to be, you can't really gather data from the product launch that easily. The results must be understandable. In my first job, I was doing a classification for the support of human decision making, and I used a neural network. And what happened was that the product owner was like, yes, Jonne, this is really cool, but it's really difficult for me to actually do anything on behalf of it because I don't understand what's going on. So it was a good lesson for me to actually to understand that when humans are making decisions, you need to actually make the analysis meaningful and transparent. So you need to have an all-around specialist when working on the case human case. So you need to have a business expertise, you need to have a domain knowledge, and you need to be able to, you need to be educated to ask questions how and why. Whereas, if you think about machine, a PhD in computer science might be more useful. Because it's about big data quite often. It's about volume, variety, velocity. It's about using programming to actually transform the data so that it can be analyzed. And often here, you don't have to be. So you can use neural networks. You can use deep learning. Because it's about as long as it works. It can be about making small decisions in a short period of time, quite many times. So you can test things. You can actually see if this works and it drives towards a business benefit. Let's go with that. Okay, so now we have identified who's the decision maker and what's the case. Then it's about making acceptance and validation criteria, meaning that this is really important pace, and quite often it falls short. It's about creating a rule set with the decision maker. Okay, these are the criteria that need to be fulfilled in order for something to happen on behalf of the analysis. So it's about making proper foundations to actually do any actions on behalf of the data. It's about making the analysis process transparent. It's about making them understand. It's about so that, for example, if the analyst changes in between the project, the one who continues the work can actually continue it, and there is no mistakes in there, in assumptions and whatnot. So the organizations that capture the full potential of data science, they recognize who's the decision maker. Those data science teams that promote action, they talk about data. I was working in this media company with a product and a series of decision-making analysis, and we had this weekly session with the decision makers, and 2 days prior to the actual meeting, we sent them PDF, and we agreed that everyone really reads through the analysis and they have remade questions, and we can have proper discussion about what the analysis means and how they act on behalf of it. But what really happens was that quite many nods, just a few questions, and even less actions. It didn't feel particularly nice. It didn't feel like we were making an impact. So we began to investigate what's going on here, and we placed the analysis to Intra instead of PDF, and we started analyzing the clickstream data. And what we found was that the session length was not long enough for people to actually understand the results, even though if they were PhDs in computer science or machine learning and whatnot. So we asked the business that, okay, why is it so? And they said that, well, we don't have the time, and so there's no questions, and we don't dare to ask any questions in the meeting because it feels like we're wasting everyone else's time. It's a simple problem. So we started thinking about different kind of approaches, and one member in our team came up with this idea of setting a Q&A session in the beginning of our meetings. Very simple thing. 10 minutes, only questions about the data. What does the standard deviation actually mean? So it started from the very basic ones. We were actually quite surprised that we were talking about clustering and we were talking about classification, but we were still struggling with the basics. Well, the meeting also, the 1 hour wasn't enough anymore. We needed 1 hour and 30 minutes. But what happened with this one is that people collectively started being smarter with the data. They started to be proficient to ask better and more important questions in their business lines. And while they ask better questions, there becomes this pull from the business side. So instead of it being a selling process, it becomes a joint collaboration project. If you think about what's going on here, it's like the evolution from BI, where the business maker might have had a question about, could you give me the last week's sales? And that actually is already framed to support the decision maker's agenda. Intentionally, non-intentionally, still. The second evolution of analytics has been the data science, where we promote insights to the business. But there's only a limited number of hands and brains to actually do this. And it requires quite a lot of evangelism, and it takes time. But with this kind of approach, when the organization as a whole creates smarter with the data, the level of the first request are higher. And while people are getting better at using data, they're also educating one another in their daily meetings. So what is really going on with this kind of activity is the crowdsourcing of forming the business problems to hypotheses that can be solved with data analytics. So for the data science teams, data scientists, this means easier sales, easier convincing inside the company. And for organization, this means better decisions as a whole. It means that the organization is collectively smarter. So organizations and data science teams that capture the full potential of data science, they talk about data. A bit about prerequisites for data products, because this is important. And those organizations that actually captured the full potential and managed to minimize the throughput time, they recognize that you have to align accordingly. Okay, let's think about this one again. If you're doing data products, it's about automating this pipeline. Traditionally, and unfortunately, quite often it's still so that you have to first call the IT that, okay, I need a server to actually do the crawling, get data from somewhere and throw it off somewhere. And at least in Finland, we have quite long holidays, so it's quite often so that when we call IT, we get the message back that Pekka is on holiday and receives back on 2 weeks. And so what happens there is that kind of process takes ages. And eventually, when you start doing some kind of analysis, you meet that you have to have Informatica, for example, or some other ETL tool which requires licensing for doing the job. And there's only a limited number of people in the company that can do that. Takes ages. So what happens is that once something is ready, the product owner, decision maker, has already forgotten what's going on. They already have a different roadmap. They're already going to different direction. It doesn't have to be like this. There are the cloud technologies, there are the people in the market that can actually do this in a short period of time. For example, in our job interview, we have this pipeline as a job interview question, and some of the people can actually do this within 5 hours. It's not probably as production ready as it should be, but that's just a pointer. So those organizations that promote action and integrate data science to business processes, they do empowerment. They let the people actually choose the tools. They let them decide that, okay, if they need the server, they can do it, and there's no need for additional bureaucracy. But they also take different stakeholders early on. If it's about security, it needs to be discussed very early on. If it's about some product that the feature comes within, it must be discussed early on. Quite often I see that when people start working on, our companies start working on data science, they start doing this horizontally. They're just mapping all the different data sources. What do we have at hand at the moment? And then they create a data warehouse which is really, really well thought out, and the data quality is just excellent. But this takes ages. This might take even years to actually accomplish in companies. So those companies that capture the full potential of data science, they go in verticals instead. So starting from the business case, starting from the decision maker, and then solve it. And then going to production vertically. And once you're doing more and more of these, you're using the same kind of technologies, same kind of the data processing pipelines, so you don't have to do everything from the scratch again. But what after like 1 year or 2 years, when you start having 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 different kind of data processing jobs in your company, how do you manage them? This is something that quite many companies, the early adopters of data science, are currently struggling with. And many of them, because they didn't think about it too early on, they're struggling on how do they actually manage the upkeep of data science. There's no right or wrong answer. You can have centralized or decentralized analytics. You can embed your analytics within product teams. But it's something that quite often what I see, the most successful companies that take advantage of data science, they have this thought out. They have this planned. Measure, learn, improve your own performance. What are the bottlenecks? Do we have the right skill sets? Which of these phases is taking the longest? It's about finding the metrics. It's about finding methods of evaluation to monitor your own performance. Because that's actually the only way to improve as a data scientist and to promote action. One other way is to get feedback. And this is actually quite important. Those companies that manage to leverage data science and integrate the business processes, they get feedback from the business. Are you, as a data scientist, making an influence? Or as a business decision maker, are the data scientists within our company influencing my decision making? Very basic questions. But if there is no influence, then something's fundamentally wrong. Is the decision making any effect to the decision making process? The analyze, I mean. And more importantly, can the results of your analysis work be translated to actually euros or kronors or whatever the currency is? Because this is really important. You need to be able to translate your efforts to whether it's knowledge. Knowledge is also can be translated to translated to something that's measurable, but money as well. Regardless of whether it's about data science to support the organization to make better decisions or it's about creating smart data products, what really matters is whether data science truly promotes action or whether it's truly integrated to the actual business processes. What's the time from the first initiative to the final action? Thank you. And if you want to talk more about what we do with our customers, what kind of solutions do we make, or you want to talk about the different kinds of challenges you might have or you might have faced in your path, we are more than glad to discuss about those. Thanks.